You.
At the outset, let me thank Dr. Kunji Mohiddin and Dr. Mitra Saxena for providing me this opportunity to present before the August gathering of Noesis 2.0. Greetings from Jawaharlal Nehru Medical College, where we have a special virtual lab for training our students and learners. I would start my presentation by presenting myself before you as your candidate for Clinical Research Committee FOGSI. I have been a teacher, trainer, and guide since 20 years, and I have a special interest in research and publications. Obstetrics is like a game of Mario. With more awareness and playing the game better, the difficulty level keeps rising. We are confronted with more challenges. The challenge given to me today is PROM, previous cesarean section, and meconium-stained liger. The flow of my talk will be in the form of real case scenarios, and we will learn about what was done and what should be done. And finally, we will have our take-home messages and our lessons learned. Now let us look into the first case. A primary gravida, 32 years old, conceived after IVF, reported to labor room at 37.2 weeks of gestation with pre-labor rupture of membranes since 4 hours. Pause was 2 centimeters dilated and 30% effaced. We provided the assessment and gave antibiotics, and monitoring was done by continuous electronic fetal monitor. The CTG was reassuring, as you can see, good acceleration, the baseline was normal, and there were no deceleration, good beat-to-beat variability was there. Spontaneous activity started at 12 hours after the PROM. The augmentation was done with titrating low-dose oxytocin. The CTG trace was normal throughout the labor, as you can very well see with good contractions also. There was good acceleration and beat-to-beat variability and a normal baseline with no deceleration. The labor was monitored by partograph. Spontaneous delivery of 2.8 kg female child was obtained with a good UPGAR score. The lessons learned from this case are that IVF conception and pre-labor rupture of membranes both make the labor a high-risk labor. However, it does not always mean that the labor would not progress normally. Even though a high-risk case for IVF conception, the labor progressed normally here. Continuous electronic fetal monitoring assures fetal safety and offers us opportunity to pick up any abnormality. The healthcare providers can allow spontaneous vaginal delivery if there is good progress. We have a peace of mind when there is good monitoring, and if the pregnancy and labor are progressing uneventfully, the monitoring can be done well and the labor can be allowed to progress. Here is a case to 29-year-old, second gravida, P1 and L1, previous vaginal delivery. The BMI was 28. She came to the delivery room with PROM at 39 weeks of gestation. Apart from hypothyroidism, which was well treated on Troxin, well monitored, and with a good normal values of TSH, the mother had no relevant medical history. Upon arrival, that is, at 0 hours of the PROM, the vitals were normal with temperature 37.5 degrees centigrade, blood pressure was 120 by 80 millimeters of mercury, pulse was 76 beats per minute, and the training liger was clear. A normal CTG was recorded. After the PROM, pulse was 1 centimeter dilated, 25% effaced, head central, station -3 to -2. Here you can see normal CTG with a baseline of 135 to 140, the VR of 5 to 15, variability, no the accelerations, as you can see, A is 3, and there were no deceleration in this patient. Expectant manage was allowed to allow a spontaneous onset of labor. The sterile vaginal pad was given and instructions were given for no digital or vaginal examination unless indicated. Single shot of IV cefazolin was given according to department local guidelines. The fetal heart monitoring was done initially by intermittent auscultation and 4-hourly CTG was done and it was non-pathological. Patient started having contractions at 18 hours after PROM, still in latent phase, like was draining clear. The closer monitoring was started at 24 hours PROM with continuous electronic fetal monitor. At 26.5 hours after PROM, the CTG started showing a pathological pattern with tachycardia. The FHR was 175 beats per minute. The variability was reduced. There was no acceleration. However, there were no deceleration. So we had a tachycardia and reduced variability. There were 4 contractions in 10 minutes. Half hour later, the CTG started recording one uncomplicated deceleration. That is loss of FHR greater than 60 beats per minute for less than 60 seconds. The mother developed fever and of 100 degrees. There was light meconium and liporosmelia also. Suspected chorioamnionitis and mother was given IV cefazolin and metronidazole. You can see there was a pathological CTG over a period of 1 hour in spite of resuscitative measures. And this was at 27 hours and 45 minutes after PRM. And suspicious pore waters were there because of the liquor was smelly. And hence the decision was taken for cesarean section. The baby was well with normal acid bed status. The pH and vital values are also normal. Here you can see the pathological trace for tachycardia and decelerations. However, the baby came out to be well with normal acid base status. Now, what are the lessons learned from this case? The fetus was having tachycardia. There was absent variability and was at risk of acidosis. Despite the pathological CTG over 1 hour, infant was not hypoxic after labor as would have been expected and was delivered with a normal acid base status, pH and vital values by C-section. The fetus responded to the maternal infection by a state of hibernation as it stopped responding to external stimuli and withdrew itself, shown by a pathological monotone heart rate pattern. Thus, we can learn that it is necessary to recognize that the pathological CTG trace requires close attention to avoid a point at which the adaptive mechanisms fail. Fetus in the present case was able to sustain a well-preserved metabolism. We know that CTG is essentially a test with high false positive rate, and it is not rare that neonates with prenatal abnormal CTG findings do not show acidemia or hypoxemia. However, in case of PROM, chorioamnionitis should always be kept in our mind, and judicious waiting is advisable with close monitoring. And when we find a pathological trace, it is appropriate, we should do a timely intervention. Case 3 was a primea gravida at 41 weeks of gestation, was admitted to the delivery suite at 20 hours. The pregnancy was uneventful. Spontaneous rupture of membrane was there 36 hours earlier prior to the admission, and she was contracting irregularly for 12 hours. She was in established labor when she reported, with 4 to 5 strong uterine contractions per 10 minutes. CTG was commenced at 20.07 hours, and the trace was normal at this stage. As you can see, good uterine activity, variability is good, and accelerations are present. Baseline is normal with no decelerations. At 21 hours, she was 2 centimeters dilated and fully effaced, that is same as admission 12 hours before. As there was no change in cervical dilatation despite regular painful contractions, an oxytocin infusion was commenced at 21.20 hours at the rate of 1 milliunits per minute. Again, at 22.50 hours, the rate of infusion was doubled. Although a note was made of the decelerations on the CTG trace, the oxytocin infusion was further increased at 23.20 hours and again at 0.20 hours, that is past midnight, to 8 milli-international per minute. As you can see in this trace, there are decelerations here. The activity is there, but because there was no cervical change, the oxytocin infusion was kept on increasing by the obstetrician team. A repeat vaginal examination at 1.20 hours revealed now the cervix was fully dilated. At this point, the rate of oxytocin infusion was reduced to 4 million units per minute because the contraction frequency exceeded 5 per 10 minutes. With repeated deceleration, active pushing commenced at 2.40 hours. Spontaneous vertex delivery of a male baby was achieved at 3.12 hours, but the liquor was thick meconium. Apgar score given was 2 at 10 minutes and 6 at 5 minutes. The infant was resuscitated and transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit, but suffered hypoxia. As you can see here in the CTG trace, which had become pathological because of oxytocin augmentation, the contractions 4 to 5 in 10 minutes. As you can see, the baseline 160 to 165. There were no accelerations. The variability was less than 5 or less than 40 minutes. The typical decelerations are seen, variable type of decelerations here you can see, which became more deeper. But as the pushing was commenced and the labor was advanced, the decision was not taken for any intervention, but allowed to deliver. Gradually developing hypoxia, probably there was a cord and rising baseline, severe atypical variable deceleration, and diminished variability, as you can see in this trace. What happened in this case? This is a typical example of gradually developing fetal hypoxia during labor. There were 4 strong contractions in 10 minutes. Oxytocin was not necessary and should have been withheld. By 23.20 hours, the CTG trace had become pathological. Despite the increasing baseline rate, repeated variable deceleration that were becoming deeper and wider, the oxytocin infusion was increased. By the time of commencement of active pushing at 2.40 hours, the trace had already become ominous and needed immediate delivery. This case illustrates the adverse perinatal outcome arising out of inability to interpret the CTG and not take the recommended actions based on the trace. The NICE guidelines say that a minimum of hourly formal systematic intrapartum CTG assessment has to be recommended. And this was not followed in this case. NICE also recommends conservative measures such as change in position, stopping the oxytocin infusion, tocolysis or hydration in case of severe contractions, and reviewing the clinical situation when the CTG trace becomes suspicious or pathological, and either doing a fetal blood sampling or timely delivery if the pathological trace does not respond to the resuscitative measures. Thus, this recommendation should be followed in a case where a pathological trace has been observed. Here is a case 4. This is also a real life scene already published. A mother was attempting a VBAC. Deceleration of epiture was noted while mother was being monitored by CTG. This recovered. However, following review of the mother by obstetric registrar, a plan was made that if there were further decelerations or meconium stained liquor, then a cesarean section would be discussed. An ARM was performed. The cervix was 2 centimeters dilated. There was significant meconium, and another deceleration occurred with quick recovery to the baseline. Here you can see these are the deceleration. The variability is also reduced in this case. The mother was reviewed again by the obstetric team, and grade 2 cesarean section was discussed, that is delivery within 75 minutes. The mother understood and gave her consent. CTG was discontinued for transfer of the patient to the operating theatre. There were 3 attempts at setting the spinal anesthetic. And during this time, there was also difficulty in monitoring the fetal heart rate. The fetal heart was not monitored approximately for 15 minutes. Difficulties in monitoring the FHR was not recognized by the multi-professional team due to clinicians being tasked focused on giving the spinal anesthesia. This led to a loss of situational awareness. In addition, concerns regarding the fetal monitoring were not escalated by the team. Following the spinal anesthesia, it became apparent that there was a non-recovering fetal bradycardia. Now the cesarean section was recategorized as an urgent one, a grade 1. On opening the abdomen, there was scar dehiscence. The baby was born in poor condition, requiring full resuscitation and transfer to the NICU. Cerebral functioning monitoring showed an abnormal pattern, and baby had a diagnosis of grade 3 hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. This is a true case, happened in NHS discussion. Now, in this case, there was difficulty in spinal anesthesia and there was clinical oversight as monitoring of FHR was not there. What do we learn? We learn that it is important to assign one single person specially to monitor the FHR in case of delay in anesthesia. If you're finding difficulty in monitoring, then we should find solutions for that. A handheld fetal Doppler becomes useful and it should be carried to the operating theatre. Consider general anesthetic in case of emergent delivery, as spinal anesthesia may have problem and may take some time. This has to be decided by the obstetrician team and the anesthesia team in unison. Now let us look at the case 5. A 31-year-old lady was admitted in early labor. She had a previous cesarean section for failed ventouse and there was one vaginal delivery. She was admitted in early labor. She progressed to full dilatation spontaneously. She was on continuous electronic fetal monitoring. After full dilatation, that is 15 minutes after the full dilatation, a CTG recording showed prolonged or typical variable decelerations, as you can see in the image. Deep decelerations. Emergency cesarean section was decided upon, and though she had a previous failed ventouse, it was considered that instrumental delivery is not appropriate in this case. And on opening, partial scar dehiscence was noted. The prolonged, late, or recurrent variable decelerations of fetal bradycardia, these are often the first and the only signs of uterine rupture. So we have to be very alert if there is a prolonged or variable deceleration and fall in fetal heart. Bujold and Gother showed that abnormal patterns in fetal heart rate are the first manifestation of uterine rupture in 87% of patients. Thus, monitoring the previous cesarean section patients who are undergoing VBAC by electronic fetal monitoring is appropriate and recommended. Timely detection and appropriate management is imperative if such kind of abnormal patterns are noted. Let us now look at the case 6. She was a multipara and admitted with spontaneous rupture of membranes at 37 weeks of gestation and was being observed in the antenatal ward. She had a previous cesarean section for abruption leading to a stillbirth, wherein covular uterus was diagnosed and PPH was treated by medical management. She was in the antenatal ward. She was not in labor. However, she developed sudden severe abdominal pain and CTG was done for her. CTG showed typical deep decelerations, as you can see in the trace here, deep and wide deceleration. Quickly, an emergency cesarean section was performed. Uterine rupture at previous hour was noted. Baby was found in the peritoneal cavity, was delivered and saved. This case required prompt intervention despite lack of any external signs of uterine ruptures and without any signs of labor. Previous abruption and covular uterus have not been reported as risk factors for uterine rupture in literature. However, several case reports have highlighted previous PPH, Wheeling sutures, and any interventions for PPH as a risk factor for uterine rupture. Thus, monitoring term previous cesarean sections with CTG saved the day for this patient. Let us look at the case 7, which was a twin gestation. Primi gravida at 37 weeks with dichorionic diamniotic twin pregnancy presented in labor at 23 hours. The pregnancy had been otherwise normal and history revealed a spontaneous rupture of membrane with passage of clear light at 10 hours in the morning. General examination findings were unremarkable. The presentation of twin 1 was cephalic and twin 2 was breech. The cervix was 3 centimeter dilated belly phase. Both twins had the normal CTG trace. As you can see, the CTG trace of twins are recorded here. At 3 hours, the cervix was fully dilated. Active pushing was commenced at 4 hours and oxytocin infusion started increased at 4.20 hours. At 4.45 hours, decision was made for trial of instrumental delivery in view of failure of progress. Here you can note very well that there was small deceleration in twin B when the twin A was being delivered. Patient was shifted to the operating room in view of perceived need for intervention. Twin 1 was delivered by Ventus with a birth weight of 2.2170 grams. Herein we notice that the decelerations were deeper. Second twin was breech and the breech was higher. The pathological trace discouraged any attempt at breech extraction or further delay by just observing or descent of the breech. The twin 2, that is the twin B, the baby was promptly delivered by cesarean section. The patient was already in the operating room, so time was saved, and the APGAR of the twin B was 4 and 8 at 1 minute and 5 minutes. What are the learnings? The continuous electronic fetal monitoring and its correct interpretations and prompt intervention is recommended in twin delivery. Delivery decisions have to be taken by senior obstetricians, and decision to use operating room as a location of delivery procedures gives breathing space for appropriate actions and readiness for the second twin. Delay in extracting the second baby could be detrimental, and in case you have a pathological trace, and breech extraction should be avoided, and quick decision should be taken for emergent delivery. Let us look at some recommendations which are there for meconium stained amniotic fluid. It is recommended that CTG must always be considered in labors complicated by meconium stained amniotic fluid because of its association with hypoxia and infection. However, the fact that most meconium is physiological has resulted in conflicts regarding level of intervention, whether in case of low-risk pregnancy. In majority of cases, meconium represents a physiological response in a mature fetus, but in a small number, it may indicate a fetal problem. Thus, it is important to detect hypoxia by monitoring, which may lead to a MAS, that is meconium aspiration syndrome. Now, what about thin meconium? For thin meconium in gestations more than 37 weeks with no risk factors for placental insufficiency or infections, continuous electronic fetal monitoring is not deemed mandatory by some national guidelines. However, intermittent auscultation and maternal observations for signs of sepsis must be performed to highest standards. With immediate conversion to continuous electronic fetal monitoring, if there are any new risk factors, or if pyrexia develops, or if there are concerns about the quality and findings of the intermittent auscultation. That is, if there is a progressive rise in baseline FHR, as you can find in this trace, which is about nearing 190 beats per minute. So this is a cause for concern. What are the recommendations for continuous electronic fetal monitoring? This could be meconium with risk of infection or hypoxia, thin MSF with previous clear ligal. That means if previously the ligal was clear, now meconium is a new finding. So this is a recommendation for continuous electronic fetal monitoring. If the labor gets prolonged, then you have to continuously monitor with electronic fetal monitoring. If the FHR is normal, no specific action is required regardless of type of meconium or presence of signs of infection. With thick meconium and possible infection, a careful review of the labor progress is prudent by a senior obstetrician. Delivery should be considered if spontaneous delivery is likely to be delayed. So alternative measures should be considered. In case of suspicious pattern, this indicates fetus under stress. Either there is a mechanical compression, that's a cord compression, or there's a possibility of infection, there's a possibility of risk of hypoxia. We should be alert. Urgent clinical review should be done. Interventions to improve the fetal condition should be done, like IV fluids, changing the maternal position, providing oxygenation. These could be intervention. And we have to consider the interplay of sepsis, meconium, and hypoxia and try to reduce the fetal stress. If the expected interval of spontaneous delivery is found to be long, we have to take a decision to intervene and in emergent delivery. In all cases of meconium staining, individualized care is important. We need to consider the special situation, the appropriate monitoring, and then decide what is to be done for that particular patient. Consider immediate C-section in abnormal monitoring if there is possibility of sepsis where spontaneous delivery is not imminent. If decision is made to continue the normal delivery trial, the vaginal delivery trial, then continuous fetal heart rate monitoring should be recommended or should be done, as fetal hypoxia may develop quickly in presence of meconium. Where possible, clinical decisions should be made to avoid deterioration of such a trace to become pathological. Like if there is a reduction in baseline variability, as you can see in the trace, there is almost absent variability. Such kind of trace may quickly become pathological with deceleration and may give to a poor fetal outcome. So the clinical decisions have to be taken quickly. In case of a pathological pattern, there is a greater risk of significant hypoxia, usually a complicated baseline tachycardia, but occasionally reduced variability on an admission CTG. This requires expedited delivery by C-section or assisted birth. The senior clinician makes decision with clear documentation about the type of trace. The fetal blood sampling and fetal ECG by ST analyzer or STAN is not useful in predicting meconium aspiration syndrome. Fetal blood sampling gives false positive result because of presence of bile acid, which may turn which may give a basic report. Increased baseline, repeated atypical or prolonged deceleration, they all indicate hypoxia, and decision has to be taken for an intervention, either C-section or assisted birth. Here you can see few pathological traces which have been noted in meconium staining of amniotic fluid. These are decelerations and reduced variability. Here again, you can see reduced variability and decelerations. The variable deceleration not so deep, but they are there and do indicate hypoxia. Here you can see the rise in the baseline, deep decelerations here, and suddenly there is deep in the fetal heart. There is fetal bradycardia, which can the meconium aspiration syndrome babies show this kind of pattern, and we have to be very alert. Here you can see rise in the baseline and few decelerations. These also should be an alert, and we have to review the situation and take early decisions. Lessons learned. Every patient and every baby behaves in a different way. Just like no two fingerprints are same or similar, same, we have to agree that every labor is different. So know the passenger before it embarks on the final journey of labor. So antenatal assessment is very important. Apart from that, when the patient reports to the labor room, the primary assessment of the passage and the passenger is very important. All your patients do not require a section, but let us remember that all patients cannot deliver vaginally. Obstetrician's role is to be the most vigilant person with masterly inactivity, hopefully expectant, but technically and team-wise prepared. A leader who diagnoses well, who monitors well, who takes the appropriate decisions in a timely manner. Paperless partogram and a CTG. There are numerous modalities which we can use for monitoring a passenger. But the most important lessons we learn are from our own practice. And that we need to remember. Practice makes man perfect. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Surekha, for the wonderful talk. Now I invite Dr. Sridevi to introduce our next